and welcome to Quirky Crafts and Collectibles. I'm Pandora Box and Happy New Year! Well, I thought I'd start with the new year with crafts because I've done so many unboxings of dolls and stuff, so I thought we'd do some crafts as well. And I thought I'd like to share you in two parts how to make a bear. Some creative ways to make a bear anyway. And I thought today I'm going to show you how to make this bear right here. It's a little bit different. Now these are all bears that I have made in the past. I've made quite a few, but these ones I have made and I've given them to my husband and I've kept for myself, and I've put some in competitions as well. And this was my very first bear, absolutely first bear, and I was told I should never do a bear that has long fur like this, and it's just wrong and you shouldn't do it. But you know what, it was my first bear and I thought I'll do it the way I wanted to do it because I love long fur, and this is how I did it. And I decided to put him into the Camden show, and lo and behold, I did come first. we came first. So don't listen to people saying you can't do this and you can't do it that way and you shouldn't do it this way and you shouldn't do it that way. You have your own way of doing your own bears, and every bear is always different, no matter how many times you do the same pattern. In fact, this bear I've done a few times, always turns out different. Now just to give you an example, this bear here, right there, ding ding, is this bear right here. And you can see he's a small bear, but he's different. Now somebody gave me a carpet. It wasn't really a carpet that I wanted, it was a funny shape, and we thought, you know what, this would make an absolutely beautiful bear. So again, I put him in a competition and he came first as well. For some reason I excel in my bears. So whenever you're doing a bear, no matter what it looks like, you know, I collect these bears. Actually, that's this bear there. There you are. Give you a close look. So that's that bear there. So it depends on the fabric you use and the fur you use. Your bears are always going to turn out different. And I collect a lot of these magazines in the past. Now I go to a lot of op shops, and you can pick them up for about $1, $2, and always make sure when you're going through your books, have a look at them and make sure that the pattern's in the center. Okay, very important, otherwise it makes it hard to make the bears. So without further ado, we are going to create this bear and show you some techniques that I've learned in the past, and I like to share them with you. So with part one, we're going to start with this bear, and this bear is called Monet. Well, these are the things you're going to need to make a teddy bear. First, you need your fabric, you need your joints, you need a pencil, pens, scissors, needles, thread, some tools, stuffing, baking paper. We'll come to that in a second. I've got my sewing kit just here. But you need a pattern. So this is a book I found in one of the stores at Salvation Army, and I've decided I'm going to make this teddy bear. She's a large teddy bear, and I'm going to have a look at her. Let's get straight to the page. And this Miss Monet, beautiful teddy. We're not going to do the clothes, we're just going to do the teddy bear. Now she stands at 64 centimeters tall, or 25 inches. So she's quite a large bear. And they've used a golden fur, but we're going to use this type of fur. I'm going to go so different. It's almost like a cow fur. It's really soft and lovely, and there's multiple colors through it when you move it around, and it's important which way you cut the material. But before we get to that, so when you get your book, always make sure that when you go through the books, you go to the center and make sure the patterns are there. Never buy the book without the pattern, otherwise you'll never make these dolls. So they're stapled in, we take them out, and we find, go back to the page, we find the name, Miss Monet. We open up the pattern, Miss Monet, and you can see her pattern through here. And then you cut, no, you don't cut these ones out. You keep these always intact, because on the back there are other patterns and you don't want to destroy those. So what we do, and this is where we use our baking paper, we replicate the pattern on the baking paper. So let's clear the table and let's have a look what we're going to do. So once we've decided what bear we're going to do and we find the pattern, like I said, we don't cut this pattern out because it'll destroy the patterns underneath. So what we want to do is take our baking paper, put it over the pattern, and we're going to trace. So we trace our pattern, and when you do this, just try and make it as neat as possible to size. Put all your markings in, so your arrows, what it is, it's a head, gusset, double S, you cut one, and it will tell you how many to cut, and then it'll give you directions on what to do. So you want to put all this information in your pattern, okay? And when you're finished with your pattern, this is what it should look like. So here's my paper. Now I've just cut out a piece like that. I've got my body, my gusset, my arms, legs, head, and ears. So once you've got that, we can take this away because we don't need this anymore. And what we're going to do now is cut out these patterns. So this is what we're going to be using for our pattern. Now, we only need to cut one out, but when we lay them on our fabric, we need to lay them out so we utilize the fabric that we're going to use. Okay. So just keep cutting all your pieces out, and once you've got them all cut out, then we start to lay them on our fabric. Now, what some people have done, and what I've done in the past, is once I've cut my patterns, I actually lay them and replicate them on a hard cardboard. So once you've cut your pieces out, got all the your patterns out, the paper can curl, as you can see, it's curling up. So there's another way you can do this, and you can photocopy your pattern, and once you've photocopied your pattern, you can actually put them on a cardboard. So it just makes it a little bit easier when you're cutting your pattern. Okay, so here's another pattern that I've cut, and I've cut all the pieces that I originally need. Okay, so if I need 2 heads, you know, I've cut 2 heads the same way, but what I've done is I've cut it so I cut this way, so I need to do them the opposite way. Okay, So that just makes it easier. If you're going to be using the same pattern all the time, it is a good idea to photocopy them and, you know, redraw them. And as you can see, I've done it so many times that you've got drawings all over it. But I write down everything that I need to write, that I need. So if I need it open, leave it open here, keep the arrow down. So this is the way you know which way the fur goes. Okay, so, but because I'm not going to do this bear again at this stage, I pin them, so I can pin them down to the fabric. Okay. So once we've got our pattern all cut out, then we need to start sorting out our fabric. Now, depending on what fabric or fur you choose, it can get really fluffy everywhere, so just be aware of that. Now this is what we're going to be using today, and I've got 1/2 meter of fabric, and now I'm going to lay the patterns onto the fur on the opposite side. Now before we lay our pattern onto our fur, we've got to find out which way the fur is actually going. So in this case, the fur is going towards me. Okay, so you can see it's sitting flat, and that's the way we want to lay our pattern. So for instance, if I get the body, okay, so the arrow, that arrow, let's bring it up closer to you, that arrow is to determine which way the fabric's going, or the fur is going, which direction. So at this stage it's going downwards, so we follow the arrow and we're going to go downwards. So the bear, that's his body, so the bear will flow downwards nicely. You don't want it to be upside down and it just sticks out, so you don't want that. Okay, so what we want to do now is work out it is going downwards. So for me, for you guys, it is going this way. Okay, so we're going to go this way. So I want to be laying my pattern down that way. So when we turn the fabric over, it's going down. We know it's going down. We follow the pattern, the way it's going. Now remember, this says body cut 2, 1 in reverse. So one is going to be this way, the other one we turn it around, and that's the reverse side. So that's how the reverse side will be, and we cut that way. But we want to work out how much material we need. So this is where we need our pins. So we want to lay, so we said we've got one going that way, the other one just leave a little bit of a gap, and we want to go this way, same way, and that's going to be there. And just lightly pin it at the moment, because we're trying to work out how much material we're going to use, because it determines on how much fabric we will use. So I can get this fur into that area, so I can put it in there. So remember, I've got another one here. Now if you're concerned on how much fabric you need, you can do duplicates. So if you want 2 of these like I did earlier, you can do 2 of these, so then you know exactly how much material you'll need. So I know I've got a gap here, and we're going to have gaps in between, so this is where the ears can go. Okay, so always remember where your spaces are. Okay, now this is my head, arrow going down, and it's going to go this way because our fabric is going down this way. So I know I need one this way, and I will need one, because it's reversed, cut 2, 1 reversed, goes that way. Okay, so just lightly pin in there. Now legs, the same. Now I can fit, I've still got room down here, I know, So I can put a couple of ears down here. I can put a foot here because I'm going inside. I will need 2, so remember that. Turn him over, so the other foot's that way. Now we'll need 4 of these, so it is going to take a bit of fabric. We'll need 4 of these. So this is where you really want to make sure that you're utilising all the fabric you've got. And then we have the arms. So we've got space here. Again, we're going downwards. We can go in a little bit of an angle, and then the other one is that way. And because we need 2 of these, we can go 1 and 2, and then we can go 3 and 4, the same with the legs, making sure that you're not going into the area. So if I cut in that way, I can fit that in there. So making sure, you know, and any space that you've got there, like I said, you might need an ear. You'll also need a paw. Here are the paws. Now the paws, you can use this side if you don't want to use a flat fabric. So some people use leather or a different type of fabric, or you can use this side, and that's what I tend to use. Okay, so that's what that's going to be. So once you've worked out how much material you need, then you can start cutting. So I'm going to just work out my pattern and I'll come back. Okay, so once you've laid out your pattern, I've done what I required. So 1 gusset, just 1. 2 heads and 1 in reverse. 1 body, the reverse body. So you can see I've worked out exactly where I needed my patterns to be. I decided not to use this paw because I want to use this part of the paw, because I want to use, instead I'm going to use this part of the paw because I'm going to be using this side of the fabric, not this side. So I wanted to give it a bit of contrast. Now, as you can see, I have done 2 arms, opposites, and the insides. Now I've cut the paws out because I'm going to be using these parts. One I still have to do, so they'll be here. So what I'm going to do is just show you quickly what I've done, just here. So this is going to be my paw of my bear, okay, and this is the outside. So if I show you my arm, that's the outside of the arm, and when we do the inside, I only cut that much, and then the palm will be this side, like the paw I showed you here. So I need all of that, and I did use a felt pen because it marked it easier. And so just to make sure it stays in place, just tack it. Now I don't need all of this, but I'm going to use a little bit more extra material. So when I stitch these together, I've got some overflow. Not sure that's the right word, but I've got that extra fabric. So I've done that side, and of course I need the reverse side. I don't mind the white part, it's got a bit of colour in it, it doesn't really matter, there's nothing there, but it's a paw, so it's only the paw that I'll be using. So I'm just going to get closer so you can have another look. Pin it in, and that's just to hold it there so it doesn't move around. want to put a little mark there. That's where you're going to be stitching, right there. And that is now your full patterns. Take it away. And you can see how much material we've used. From here to there, we still have all that fabric left. So if you use it properly, you could do another bear out of this. I could do a smaller bear if you wanted to do one in the future. So take off all the pins in the pattern. And we'll be right back. So now that I've taken the pattern away, making sure there's no pins, you can see all the markings, everything's marked out right. Okay, don't throw these out because you may use them in another project. So we put them aside, mark them out, again name it so you know what it is. Now the fun part comes where we start cutting the fabric. Now this is very, very important. If you've never cut fur before, there is a special way of doing it. Now you could use small scissors or your larger scissors, depending on what you feel comfortable with. I'm going to use my small scissors, and the way we cut it, we don't just cut it. Let me just take my bell off because it's going to be very annoying. So I'll just take my bell off. So when we're cutting our fabric, we want to make sure that we're not just cutting it like that, because what you're going to end up is with a blunt, and I'll show you that. So you don't want a blunt look like that. Okay, you want it so it flows through easily, otherwise you're going to get blunt cuts and it doesn't look very nice. So when we do this on the other side, we cut inside the material and don't lift out like that. Keep it close, nice and close. So when you turn it around, you have a nice finish to it, and it still stays fluffy. You don't have blunt edges like that. So if I put it next to the white, you can see how blunt that is, where that is much softer. Okay, so that's what we want to achieve. So I'm going to start with, you can cut, if you want to cut pieces out first, you can do that, okay, to make it easier so you're not using the whole fabric, but it's just double cutting. So what I'm going to start here. This is my first part of the body, and very slowly take your time and cut around the pattern. And the reason I use the small scissors is because you've got more control and you get a nicer finish that way. Although we're not going to be seeing that, we still want to keep this nice and neat. We don't want any blunt looks about it. Although we're stitching them, you're not going to see them, but at times you may. Okay, and there'll be a time where I'll show you why it's important to keep these edges nice and neat. And this is what I was talking about. If you wanted to cut them out first, you don't have to worry about all the fabric. If you don't have enough room, I've got enough room so I can do this, but if you don't have enough room, you can cut the pieces out first, then cut around them. But little snips, doesn't take long, as long as you're doing it neatly And I don't know if you've noticed I'm wearing no jewelry. It just makes it easier when you're doing your crafts. You don't want your craft getting in your rings or jewelry. Last thing you want is where's my ring gone? So that's one part of my body. You can see I've got two little dots there. They're going to be my holes where my joints are going. Now we turn it around. That is our first section of our body. I think you're going to think it's going to look like a cow. So I'm going to continue cutting the rest. And here we are on the last leg. So I'm just finishing off this last one. And depending on the fur that you use will determine on how much fur goes everywhere. Once we've finished cutting all our pieces, we start to match them. So, as you can see, I'm jaggeding, just trying to make sure that you guys can see out there. Okay. And make sure you've got a bin that you can chuck them straight away. Alright, so that is an arm. So now what we're going to do is match our pieces together. So we've got a leg, we have an inner arm. Just bear with me, just going to make sure I match them. So it's another leg. We've got a couple of ears. Yep, all our ears are there. This is our other arm. Okay, so they go together. Okay. And this other arm goes together. And this part here is pretty much what you're going to see finished like that, and this is where these pieces come in. So that's our paw. So we finish it that way. So that's how his paw is going to be finished. So it'll be a white paw. Okay, of course that black's going to be gone when you stitch that, and that's why I said to make sure you leave enough there at the end. So we've got enough there to play with. It's got a little overlap on that. So that's another arm. That's his arm there. So we've got two arms. These are the paws. These go underneath. And again, that's how that will finish underneath. Okay. So that's one. So these can be one leg. You see how you get different shades of the fur when you put it together? That's the other one. We'll find the other leg. The other leg. These together. This is his paw. Just move that aside. Ah, this fluff gets everywhere. Here's his body. Okay, so that's his body. That's his head. So he's going to have one side. You have one side with a black patch, and the other side's going to be a white patch. So when these go together, you'll have one side with a white patch, the other side with a patch there, and his muzzle goes over that way. I'll show you that. Now, in the pattern with his ear, with his head, this section here this section here, it says trim before sewing. So we want to trim all that. So just put that on there. That's the body. So see how it fits perfectly there? When we turn it around, it's going to have more. It's going to like, oh, looks bigger. That's because the fur's going over. Okay. So where that pattern is, just across there, it says we've got to trim all this away. Okay, so that's what we're going to do, and just very lightly trim away the fur. Okay. It makes it easier to do it before you put him on, and you're going to cut it afterwards. So we'll get that pattern. Just make sure we're how far we've got to go. Pretty much right on that corner. Just get it as even as possible, and just brush it backwards and keeping it neat. This isn't very long fur, so when you're doing a bear with long fur, you'll see more of a difference. Just keep checking it, make sure there's no dents. Now I've gone in a lot closer. This does take some time, so just be very patient. Make sure you've got very sharp scissors, and just keep trimming until you get close to the seam. You don't want to go too close, but enough to trim that off and keeping it even. So as you can see, there's a lot of fluff. It gets all over your bear. And of course, now you can see as I've got closer, you can actually tell the difference between the original and how close I've gotten now. Oh, you're back. Well, that was part 1 of bear making techniques. I hope you've enjoyed so far what you've seen. And next time, make sure you subscribe. Give me a like if you're so far happy with what we're showing you. And we'll let you know when part 2 is next. So until then, I'm Pandora Box. Chicken!